Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Jess and Ori for part 12 of Ghost Variations, direct from my study. Yesterday we were in Germany. Today we are back in Britain, and Yeli is setting about her charity tour of the great cathedrals of Britain. Catherine Tennant, who is organising Yeli's charity tour, had lined up more than the 3 or 4 cathedrals Yeli had envisaged. The project grew like an orchid in a hothouse. Now it had blossomed into 9 events. If anyone tried to say no, Catherine, her determination and tenacity veneered with charm, and her Asquith accent, simply wouldn't listen. And her targets would find sooner or later that they had said yes, even if they hadn't meant to. "Darling, you are a miracle worker," Yeli beamed at her over tea. "I dreamed this up at the end of March and you've made it all happen by June." "It's been easy," Catherine smiled. "People are only ever reluctant to take on a great musician if they actually have to pay them, which in this case is not a concern." "You are much too modest." Yeli gave her a hug. She was convinced that the rapid take-up must reflect a genuine appetite for the concerts. At each, she would play for free, welcoming all comers, with a collection afterwards. Every dean leapt at the chance of a charity performance by Yeli Durani. They recognised the longing for order and beauty in this pea-souper of a depression. Music was the quickest way to achieve it. And though local music societies could offer live concerts to those in the know, provision of them in large venues at no cost seemed a godsend. Yeli might be delighted, but now she had to work, and as if York Minster were not an intimidating enough place to begin, in a magnificent coup, Catherine had managed to book her and Adela to play together on the 10th of July at the venue Yeli most wanted, Westminster Abbey. The one thing they could not do was find the Schumann Violin Concerto in time for the tour. Yeli had no choice but to watch that part of the dream evaporate. She simply had no time to pursue it. To say the cathedral tour was the most demanding thing she had ever attempted would do it an injustice. The cycle of exhilaration and exhaustion swelled around her as if she'd swallowed Alice in Wonderland's potion and found herself dwarfed by her own dream. At York, she began to understand the scale of her task. A place's essence, she knew, can seep into your body as if by osmosis and coerce a response more physical than rational. Still, she wasn't prepared for the malevolence in the air. Tom had often told her that she was too sensitive for her own good, sometimes too imaginative as well. But Yeli remained convinced that places carry the energy of lives that are played out there, and that atmospheres can change irrevocably when they house intense suffering. So it was in York. She had thought unemployment severe in London. Here it was worse still. "For those of us who are fortunate to have gainful work, things are perfectly all right," the driver from the Minster's deanery remarked, collecting her from the station and watching her casting about as they drove, taking in the surroundings. "There are picture houses springing up absolutely everywhere, but you do have to be, so to speak, from the right side of the tracks." "What happened?" Yeli asked. "Industry or lack of it. Everything has collapsed in these parts. This county was the powerhouse for textiles and coal mining, but no longer. You might see some truly appalling slums, which we hope will be demolished. One wouldn't wish to house one's animals in such squalor. Here we are. This is the deanery. Let me take your bags." The house was tranquil and pleasant, clambered upon by roses in full bloom. It would have been easy to stay in, enjoy chatting with the dean and his wife, practice and ignore everything beyond her room and the minster. Once she might have done so, but no longer. She wanted to see beneath the surface. "I might go for a little walk," she told her hosts. "I need to stretch my legs." and she gently dissuaded them from their well-intentioned offers to go with her. It did not take long to find what she was looking for. Beyond the glories of the minster and the generous streets close by, the atmosphere sank still further. The foggy air reeked of lingering smoke and coal dust. Her stockings were turning black. She wandered down a side road and found herself in a warren of unkempt terraces which summer seemed to have left untouched. Passing a dark stone building that looked like a hostel, a doss house, mental asylum, or a combination of both, she heard moans and muffled shrieks through an open window, and a group of 4 children ran out and surrounded her, pointing at her suit and hat and pleading for money. One of the girls, muddy-legged, her dress little more than stitched-together rags, was the same height as Adrienne. "Where are your mummy and daddy?" Yeli asked them. "Our father's dead in the mines and mum's got a cough and she's on the drink," said the smallest boy, who couldn't have been more than 5. His shins, beneath the end of his short trousers, were covered in purple bruises and red scabby scrapes, unwashed and untended. He wore no shoes, and Yeli was horrified to see shards of broken glass scattered around the street, as if someone had thrown a bottle out of the nearest window. "Where do you live?" The eldest girl pointed at the house where Yeli had heard the screaming. "There since last week, but man can't pay to rent, so we have to get out before the collector comes." "But where do you go to school?" she asked. They laughed in her face. The older boy had just today found some work pushing a barrow. The 2 girls went out begging. They'd come from Darlington, they told her, walking all the way, looking for some uncle or cousin to help them, but he wasn't here after all. Yeli couldn't bear it. She emptied her whole purse into their upturned hands. "Come to my concert in the minster," she said. "It doesn't cost anything." "What, in there?" They couldn't believe her. One of them noticed her accent and scowled. "Are you German, miss?" "No, Hungarian." She brushed it aside. "Really, come to the concert and bring your mam. I'd love it if you did." Surprised and a little subdued, whether by the cash or the concert idea, the children mumbled thanks and ran away through the murk towards the doss house. Yeli turned to go back, wondering whether music really could do anything for people in such desperate circumstances. The minster glowered out of the fog. When she went in to explore, the lighting was dim and the place so gigantic that the tops of the pillars vanished into sepia shadows. She'd been here several times previously in the pre-depression days. It seemed to embrace her, its transept spreading like affectionate arms. Now it sat still, impassive, while Yeli's playful heart seemed paralysed. "There's no need to worry," the dean assured her. "You are undertaking a pilgrimage of compassion, so everything will go well." After the interval, he told her, he would make an appeal for the Northern Industries workrooms and centres for the unemployed in the Cleveland district. She tried to turn her attention back to her playing. She had chosen the programme with care. Almost an hour and a quarter of music, most of it slow, since rapid pieces full of twirls would be swallowed like plankton in the whale-belly cavern of a cathedral. The result? The slow movements of the Mozart D major, the Beethoven and the Mendelssohn concertos, a complete Handel sonata, and the immense solo chaconne by Bach from his Partita No. 2 in D minor. After scant sleep, she spent the morning rehearsing with the organist, Dr. Edward Bairstow. Everyone encouraged her, praised her, and brought her cups of tea. Dr. Bairstow exclaimed in delight at the contrast she was bringing them from what he called the poisonous materialism of their times, and Mrs. Bairstow came bustling in to press upon her the loan of a jersey, since it was so chilly inside, even though it was the middle of June. Yeli's mouth felt dry, while her hands were damp with sweat. She had begun to doubt that anyone would have the slightest inclination to listen to violin music in any case, free or otherwise. By the time the bells had struck 7 and she was in the vestry preparing, she was wondering why this escapade had ever seemed a good idea. She fastened her simplest brown and white concert dress and dabbed on just a little lipstick and face powder. She did not want to emphasise the embarrassing gulf of privilege between herself and the audience she sought. She wanted to be as close to them as she had been to those patients in the hospital. All she could do was play her best and hope it was good enough. If nobody turned up, then nobody turned up, and there'd be nothing she could do about it. And then the doors of the minster were opened with a great creak that echoed up to the roof, and peering round the vestry door, she could see them arriving. People streaming into the minster, row upon row. The volume of talk swirling around the arcs of the building rose moment by moment. She watched, incredulous. Was the whole of York here? Side by side with Dr. Bairstow, hearing her own heart thudding and the ringing rush of blood behind her ears, she stepped out into the vast space. Applause surged towards them. She glanced around the pews. To one side, some well-heeled listeners, a silk scarf, a glimmer of jewellery. These people would contribute to the collection. At the back, those who would benefit. People who could pay nothing, yet would enjoy the performance in just the same way, possibly more. Music has no respect for bank accounts. Yearly thought of the children she'd met the day before, and prayed that they too might be there, somewhere at the back, though she'd prefer them to sit at the front. The crowd was so large that she could scarcely take in the faces. Families huddled in the distant pews, elderly couples came in with walking sticks, and at the end of one row she spotted a tall man, one of whose legs was missing below the knee. An ex-serviceman, she was sure. A makeshift wooden crutch was propped beside him. Once silence fell, Dr. Bairstow started the Mozart Andante cantabile from the D major concerto. Yeli was staring down at the stone under her feet, trying to absorb herself in the music's tranquil atmosphere. Drawing out her first phrases, reaching up to a high note that seemed to last forever, suspended in ecstasy above the shifting harmonies, a welcome sense of security took her, the knowledge that nothing could go wrong tonight after all. The acoustic nourished her sound, letting it sail out to the rapt audience, and in between the pieces, the clapping pounded and pleaded, "More, more, give us more." Lowering her violin after the Mendelssohn Concerto slow movement, she spotted the one-legged veteran wiping his eyes with his sleeve. At the end, she greeted well-wishers in a daze of hope and a certainty that what she had decided to do was, after all, necessary beyond doubt, even if it might provide only a drop of comfort compared to the amount needed. But there, in the throng making for the door past the collectors, wasn't that the little girl of Adrienne's age? Yeli tried to catch her eye and wave. The child gave her a lopsided grin, then took a coin out of her threadbare pocket, it must have been from the money Yeli gave them yesterday, and to Yeli's astonishment, deposited it with a flourish in the collection bucket. Tomorrow check back for the next episode of Yeli's Cathedral tour in Ghost Variations. Thank you, good night.